History sounds neutral. It's objective. Fredy Perlman suggests something else. What we know as history is twisted and mangled and far from the truth. Bias is a constant. No matter the nationality, gender, or religion, our thoughts are bound by it. It's no understatement that I love history, but it's become increasingly clear to me just how much bias has shaped our knowledge. 4 or so years ago, I read this book, Against History, Against Leviathan, by Fredy Perlman. And for one, I didn't get its larger themes, and two, I never really came at it properly in terms of reading. But now, being someone who gets it, I understand what Perlman was really onto. History is a narrative, which he refers to as his story. It was created by empires, states, priesthoods, and bureaucracy. We don't have a neutral history. It's been shaped thoroughly by a ruling class and a male-dominated writer class. At the center of the essay is a Leviathan. It's the amalgamation of state power, armies, economies, and bureaucracies. Perlman ascertains that the scribes, historians, and priests who recorded what we know of history existed to serve rulers and to maintain order, not describe a true reality. A simple way to see this in action is looking at what we have left of early civilizations. It's clear that records focus on great kings, battles, and states of matter and law, while altogether ignoring the lives of average individuals, farmers, nomads, women. Their existence is only preserved if they interact with the state. The free individual as a community without a state did not have a his story. By definition, they were not encompassed by an immortal congregus, that is, the subject of his story. Such a community was a plurality of individuals, a gathering of freedoms. The individuals had biographies, and they were the ones who were interesting. But the community, as such, did not have a biography, a his story. Yet Leviathan does have a biography, an artificial one. The king is dead, long live the king. Generations die, but lives on. Within the Leviathan, an interesting biography is a privilege conferred on very few, or only one. The rest have dull biographies, as similar to each other as the Egyptian copies of once beautiful originals. What is interesting now is the Leviathan's story, at least to his scribes and his historians. What the hell does any of that mean? I am certain you're asking. This beautiful quote by Perlman details how stateless societies didn't have a formal history. Instead, they focused on an oral one, and rather than having a permanent record or archive of information in history. Breaking down terms a little, by biographies, he's speaking of a lived human experience. And when the Leviathan creates an artificial biography, it's to create a sense of permanence. The king is dead, long live the king. It's symbolizing that while individuals and rulers die, the institution lives on. A history is essentially the narrative that the state power has woven. Additionally, Perlman uses a large amount of Mesopotamian terms or concepts in his work. Lugal, a Sumerian term for king, which symbolized an emergence of central authority that signifies the moment when leadership would transfer from that of a communal experience to that which truly embodies Leviathan. Perlman uses a great metaphor here as well. The rest have dull biographies as similar to each other as the Egyptian copies of once beautiful originals. He is suggesting that the individual lives of people are interchangeable, they become standardized. History is not about human individuality, but on the machinations of the state. Within Against Humanity, Against Leviathan, Perlman also emphasized that state power was constantly being resisted through something as small as banditry to something larger like an outright revolt, and what's been recorded serves entirely to delegitimize these individuals. The state will label any resistance as barbarism or heresy, and the language of records has shaped these narratives. For example, a group of people out of direct control of the state are harassed in order to dominate them, and in turn, those people will fight back. This would appear as an independent society defending themselves and their independence, while the state would record it as a barbarian wanting to destroy their means of civilization. The manipulation of history into creating new narratives extends further from that of rebellious outer communities. Perlman argues that largely women have been excluded from official records because the rise of a centralized state coincided with the rise of patriarchy. Specifically, legal and political power was concentrated in male-dominated spaces, and those who kept records, like scribes or early historians, were almost exclusively male, and as such, the role of women would be diminished as their contributions, influence, and abilities would go completely unrecorded. Additionally, any woman who rejected domination would be labeled criminal, or really any number of things entirely to delegitimize them. The feats and fates of Urkagina, Dugolzagizi, and Sargon are the subject of what we call history. Mary Jane Schultz has demystified the word. When we speak of real history, of his story, we mean his story. It is an exclusive masculine affair. If women make their appearance in it, they do so wearing armor and wielding a phallus shape. Such women are masculine. With the rise of Leviathan, women are debased, domesticated, abused, and instrumentalized. And then scribes to proceed to erase the memory that women were ever important. Diamond says that illiteracy, which Schultz calls male literacy, is ideally suited to erase the past from memory. In old communities, what one elder forgot, another was likely to remember, and traditions could hardly be lost unless the whole community met disaster. This is easily my favorite passage by Perlman, in spite of it being very, very wordy. Firstly, saying that the typical subjects of histories are that of great rulers and political elites, because historical records were produced by male scribes seeking to serve the state's institutions. And when he speaks of a masculine affair, he's speaking about how women show up in historical records only when they appear occupying a role associated with masculine power, such as being a leader or a warrior, with their broader roles in society being all but ignored. Further, as centralized states developed, women were increasingly being subordinated and domesticated within the patriarchal social structure. Even further, at this point, written records were controlled by an all-male elite, and so these institutions could shape a historical memory, erasing earlier traditions where women had a greater importance. Perlman's work largely fills me with pessimism. A constant and universal dominating force is not pretty. Having said that, most of the book's actual content is about resisting this power through both small and large ways. Things like banditry, desertion, and continued thriving societies outside of a centralized authority, all representing how peoples have pushed against the expansion of Leviathan. In spite of the state wanting to delegitimize and erase these acts, this resistance recurs constantly in human history. Ultimately, Perlman presents civilization not as cultural progress, but as a gradual expansion of Leviathan. It is a system which absorbs communities, standardizes lives, and reshapes social relationships. The state does not just control land and labor, but also how history is remembered. Regardless of agreement with Perlman's conclusions, his work forces us to reconsider how history has been written, whose voices have been truly preserved. If history is truly the history of states and rulers, then much of human experience remains hidden behind an illusion. In this sense, Against Leviathan is more than a critique of the past. It's telling us how to re-examine how we view our real history.